we're going to jump into the most polarizing topic, probably of baby sleep, which is bed sharing. So let's dive in. If a mom finds herself doing bed sharing, whether it's out of pure exhaustion or perhaps out of choice, perhaps out of the feeling that it is ultimately just the easiest way to get the baby to sleep and to get more sleep yourself, what is your advice? How can she make it as safe as possible?
So I always like to start with the fact that most of the world cannot afford a separate sleep surface and a separate sleep space or location. So a lot of the world bed shares. It is really important to do it safely. We have the Safe Sleep 7 is something that you can look up. And also Professor James McKenna has a really great book called Safe Infant Sleep. And so I would say that both of those are worth reading in detail because I don't think parents who are it is important to make sure we want to really reduce the risk of suffocation is the bigger risk. And so there are things that, for example, we're not going to bed share with a baby who's premature because they're already at a higher risk for SIDS, not necessarily suffocation. We need to make sure that the mattress is firm. And a lot of parents do not have a firm mattress, right? So, this is going to help reduce the risk of suffocation. But when you talked about if they planned it or if it was out of exhaustion, one of the most important things is preparing your space ahead of time. So it is safer to properly set up your space and make a plan to bed share than to bed share after wake 5 where you're exhausted and you're like, I can't get my baby back to sleep, so I'm going to bring them into bed in the middle of the night, especially if someone else is sleeping in the bed with you and they don't know that the baby is there. So it absolutely can be done safely, but you do need to follow the guidelines for safe sleep. And that's why I really love that book resource, or again, reading through the Safe Sleep 7, because the biggest concern is suffocation. So if we're not doing it safely. But what is also not safe, so one of the interesting things is when we look at some of the incidents of death from bed sharing, we do not separate, we call it co-sleeping deaths. We do not separate bed sharing versus co-sleeping is also falling asleep on a sofa, falling asleep in a rocker, falling asleep in an unsafe sleep situation, falling asleep with an intoxicated parent, so we don't actually have all the data and numbers to separate how many people were actually sleeping and following the Safe Sleep 7. So it has to be your decision as to whether you want to do it and whether it works for your family. But I will say, if you're going to do it, please read those resources and make sure that you are a family who can do it safely. Alternatively, you can do a floor bed and your baby can be on a separate floor bed beside you so that you're on 2 separate sleep surfaces. Also, another really great thing that a lot of families like to do is set up a co-sleeping crib where the side comes down and that crib is specifically designed to attach to the bed. So then we're still kind of in the same bed. We don't have to get them back down over the crib rails, but we're sleeping next to them.
We'll make sure we link to everything in the show notes so our listeners can check out all of those resources. Now, I have to tell you, I felt that getting up from the bed and nursing my child in a nursery chair felt dangerous too, because I had an incident where I tried really hard to follow that advice and get up from the bed to feed, but I fell asleep.
Yep.
And I woke up right before the baby rolled off my lap.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened twice. And then I decided that then for me at that moment in time, the bed sharing was a better way to go and a safer way to go for me, having set up the sleeping surfaces safely. But that's also something that we often don't talk about, all those other situations that you mentioned.
I have a picture that I like to share on my Instagram sometimes of exactly that. I mean, my husband at the time took the picture and it looks like a really cute picture of us sleeping together on the couch. And she's half hanging off the side, and like there's pillow, like it's so unsafe. But I just remember hearing, don't sleep with your baby, don't sleep with your baby, don't sleep with your baby. And so, okay, I'm exhausted and I fall asleep on the couch and assume that that's safe because it's not my bed.
And that's also a message that is nice for you to share, because it comes back to listening to our intuition and trusting our gut and knowing and paying attention to when we are just beyond and too exhausted. And then setting up a safe situation, both for the baby and for us. You just mentioned a couple great resources, but we have, as a new mom, we have so many resources in terms of books and experts and advice that we get. How do you guide moms with your message? Trust your instincts and follow your gut. When should you listen to your own instinct versus when should you follow experts' advice?
Okay, so I want to add one last piece to the last comment, which is that I also think we are so quick to say, don't bed share. No one talks about the benefits. And if you want to make an informed decision, you have to understand that if you bed shared with your baby for 2 years, they would have an extra, I think it's like 13,000 hours of contact. And we all know the benefits. It might be the first 3 years. We all know the benefits of contact, right? So I'm just going to add that there as well. If you're going to make an informed decision about bed sharing, read about the benefits, and then you can read about some of the safety concerns and you can make that decision.
We're so glad you added that in there because we didn't talk about that. Yes.
So I just wanted to add that, right? That there are, anytime we hear don't do this, okay, well, but where, you think about the 13,000 hours of touch, extra hours, right? So I'm just leaving that there for people to look into. But in terms of resources and how do you know, I actually will say to you, I really don't think you should read anything. I mean, from a safety perspective of bed sharing, I think it's important, right? Because there are some risks. I think, when it comes time to, when you're in a position of being, something's not right, for example, like breathing or whatever, read, learn. But beyond that, I just think you just need to parent how it works, like whatever makes the most sense for you and for your baby. And we just know nobody back in the day read any books about this, right? We just had villages and communities of support. But I think motherhood has shifted, parenting has shifted. We are now trying to do it in a time when we just don't have a village of support. We have these expectations. But I find that the more that parents read, the more they get paralyzed.
Amazing. And we'll link to that in the show notes. And if you would like even more, our newsletter is the best way to stay in the loop. And now remember, it is the tiny joys that make the big journey worth it. I'm Annabella Daily, and we will see you in the next one. Lauren, thank you again so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.